Thank you for the kind introduction. And I must also thank you, Volkert, for the 20% and the incremental gains, because this segues extremely nicely into my presentation to those of you here and also online. You recall we have ambitious forecasts for retail media. I think it's without doubt that there's a huge potential in this industry. But there is a palpable gap between the possibilities and the realities. And what I want to speak about today is how this gap looks like in 2024 from an economics perspective, and what we kind of probably need to do to close the gap. And I hope that this will provide some ammunition for the panels. And I heard from some panelists that those are exactly the topics that they want to speak about. But let me start with a kind of very technical economic concept first. And that is this one here. It's the Wile E. Coyote moment. This is really a term that economists use to describe an economic landscape that isn't really aware of its imminent fall. Right? And this is something that we can see right now. Stock markets are still pumping, despite inflation seems to be slightly curbed, maybe not, etc. There's a huge uncertainty in the economy. And we could have this kind of gravitation moment like Wile E. Coyote, who can float on air as long as he doesn't realize that he's lost that his feet have lost firm ground. This is, of course, a risk that can occur. But I think it's also a metaphor for retail media and the hype cycle that we've seen, that we don't really realize that we are about to fall into this trial of disillusionment if we don't really come together and innovate and put these incremental gains into practice. So I'll let you to decide what's going to be the interpretation here. But good news is I think the economy is going to be all rightish, and that's going to be one of the key drivers for our market, because the stars are aligned, right? We have a unique opportunity, both cyclically, the economy, and structurally with all the transformation that we're seeing in the wider digital advertising space. It's the perfect moment, in a sense, for retail media. And we can see, of course, there's some uncertainty as traditional media really reacts very closely to economic trends. We did a correlation here, looked at several years to understand how far does advertising get amplified by economic trends, positively or negatively. And if we look at traditional media, television, radio, out of home, print, etc., you see the correlation is very clear. But now let's add in digital, including retail media, and see whether the equation still holds. Now, just look at the number 0.8 here on the right, which transforms into 0.44. That's something remarkable, which means that despite this possible Wile E. Coyote moment, in the broader digital advertising industry, we should not be too worried about macroeconomic trends overall. There are organic factors which are driving digital, i.e. digitization of companies overall, who are bringing an account to that cloud infrastructure and marketing much closer together, heightened competition for the consumer, and also a repositioning after massive price increases and branding during the COVID years to kind of position themselves as kind of ongoing top of mind for the consumer. So these are things that are fairly detached from economic trends. And another key factor is, of course, that the mass aggregation power of television has been waning over time. Here we can see some data from Ofcom, which looks at the number of broadcast TV transmissions with an audience of over 4 million, real mass audience events. And we always knew since the 1960s there's been this symbiotic relationship between mass brands and mass media. And we can see a slow erosion here in mass media's ability to gather those audiences. But of course, the physical store, etc., in a sense, remain cathedrals of mass audiences. And also new addressability paradigms are, of course, becoming extremely important to substitute for that. And retail media has a key role to play in that. And we can clearly see that if we really X-ray more deeply into advertiser strategies. So we did an analysis of over 100 different advertisers. We trawled through several quarters of their earnings calls to get into their minds to start, how are they thinking about media investments? And in particular, how is this changing for CPGs who have historically been extremely television oriented? I'm not going to go through the individual statements here, just a selection here. What you can see is a strong emphasis on efficiency, performance, digital. And also, if you compare statements 1 and 2 in here, you can see bridges being built between advertising overall and digital transformation more widely in these companies. And this means that the digital advertising share, which is already quite high in Europe, at over kind of 60%, has still potential to grow. What we can see here is a separation of advertising budget allocation by media channels. Digital pure plays, television also includes BVOD, AVOD, etc., out of home, and kind of the rest. And then also we can see it compared with US national consumer brands. Two things are important here. Number one, there is going to be more headroom for growth for digital, despite already 60+% being spent on digital. But we can also see that smaller brands are today spending more on digital. They have digital first strategies typically, as the barriers to entry are lower, which conversely means for large consumer brands, we have the US example here on the side, that there's still going to be potential to do more than they already do with their 60%. Let's zoom in a little bit more to look at agency data. This is from Convergence, where we look at German data as a snapshot here for Europe, the largest market in the EU, to understand by sector what percentage of paid media is allocated to digital channels. Again, this is agency data only, but it shows that there's a huge potential for more budgets coming, in particular in areas that are important for retail media. And I've highlighted a few: pharmaceutical, online pharmacies, for instance, FMCG, restaurants, last mile delivery, retail, FMCG care, etc. So there is huge potential. We're actually in some of the core categories, core advertiser categories, which are important for retail media, still behind the average level of digital maturity, which means there is a lot of incremental money available. The tighter ad market that we're seeing somewhere, with in particular traditional media owners suffering, we're not seeing that everywhere. And we can see a huge spectrum of growth globally. Here's an example of Q3. We're just updating this with Q4 data. And you can typically see the closer someone is to the consumer transaction and the more data there is, the less the emphasis is on selling eyeballs and more the emphasis is on selling outcomes, the higher the growth. And we can see this is a challenge for many media channels, which retail media doesn't have. They're focusing on selling audiences, but clients want outcomes. And retail media can at least potentially deliver those outcomes, bridge the CMO and the CFO worlds. And even large publishers realize this, and sometimes put it really bluntly, like here the CEO of Dotdash Meredith, the largest publisher in the US. If you can't show performance, you're dead. I'm showing you all of these things because these are examples of expectations and macro shifts in the ad industry, where we can say in retail media, we are immune to those challenges, or even we are benefactors of those challenges. The key question, though, is whether we can actually lift those opportunities and turn them into reality. You've all seen the forecast I've created around last year. The next update, the next big update is coming in the context of our Interact conference at the end of May. In the interim, I'm giving you some sneak previews of how the data is evolving and also what ingredients we need for future success. So, recap. This is kind of the landscape, including Amazon and outside Amazon. We can see here as Group M is kind of kindly hosting us, the Group M kind of EMEA/Europe forecast, probably 95% Europe next to it. So the numbers aren't too far away. We did some comparisons to see how did our forecasts compare with actuals released from some markets. The French numbers were recently published by the French SRE in affiliation with the IAB, and we expected 18.8% for retail media, including Amazon. The forecast, the actual, was 24%. In Poland, the situation were fairly close. In Poland, it was far closer. We predicted around 29%, and the actual was just shy of 30%. So this is some good going, and we're seeing some evidence in other markets that our forecast for 2023 is also holding up. But this is no moment to pat ourselves on the back, because we expected some ambitious growth and acceleration of growth in 2024, with easing inflation, with growing economy, and also with many retail media offerings still nascent, scaling up, and also the behemoth continuing the strong growth. And that would mean we need to hit 35% growth as an industry to come to the predicted number in 2024. This is a tough task. This might not be realistic for everyone. It might not be realistic for every market. We might need to lower this because it depends on a number of factors. Number one, look on the left here, a continued acceleration in Q1 and Q2, in particular in 2024, based on what we've seen in 2023. You can see the Amazon acceleration, economy eased, etc., more growth in Q3 and Q4. And of course, we have easier comparatives right now. So that should help. But it must mean carrying forward this trend into 2024. And the other is, of course, factors more complex on the retailer side, less mature entrants getting scale quickly, that display growth is catching up to kind of search growth. We see a huge gap here in France, for instance, and also more aggressive and meaningful revenue diversification coming, plus also CPM stability or curbing price erosion, which we're seeing somewhere, and also new customer acquisition, i.e. less reliance for retailers on a few large customers. Offsite expansion, I think, is going to be key for the future for 2024 and beyond. Clearly, some still need to monetize in more ways their on-site inventory, but in particular, as we want to move up the funnel, move from the 20% to maybe 40 or 50%, I think offsite is a crucial vehicle because it's only offsite that will enable retail media to fulfill its primary promise to become more than a media channel, but an infrastructure that powers much of the other open web. We're seeing somewhere else in the world, in the US, systemic big partnerships being announced. I see in Europe many partnerships as well, but piecemeal, some hesitation. European markets are fragmented. Trading cultures in television and the openness of, let's say, legacy media owners to collaborate, they vary hugely across markets. We need to build bridges, educate, to make those partnerships possible systematically and at scale. And we also need to understand that partnerships themselves are not plug and play, in particular in the programmatic space. Having technology overall is not sufficient. We need sales, narratives, proof points, etc. We need to act on that. And also we realize that the programmatic potential is still untapped. Clearly, there are huge issues about, in a sense, maintaining the sanctity of the page of the app. But in particular, when it comes to offsite, programmatic penetration is still largely untapped by retailers and also by brands leveraging retail data. But as the cookie goes away, possibly end of 2024, we need to take programmatic seriously as an infrastructure. I think we also need, on both the brand and the retailer and the agency side, to build solutions that are not media-centric, but that bring together, in a sense, the cloud world, the world of cloud, the world of CRM, first-party data and customer logic of the advertiser, and the delivery, the activation of advertising. These used to be separate silos, but increasingly we're seeing this world coming together. I think retail media has a crucial role to play, actually, to create the glue for that. Also, retail media isn't just about media products, but fundamentally also about insights, not just data to power activation, but also insights to understand why people are buying something. It's all, in a sense, a mass life experiment, for instance, to fuse data together to then fuel insights on which products to build, to grow, etc. And we also see it as vital to deliver proof points to advertisers that retail media really works, that CPMs are justified, etc., that the outcomes delivered are really there. And we see when we look at a revenue perspective here, a study from Merkle in the US, we did our own analysis, how would this stack up compared in Europe, i.e. how much non-media revenue are retailers generating online, and we can still see there's more potential here for us to move forward with that. Also, as a bridge to bring these worlds together, the worlds of other media owners, of advertisers and retailers, clean rooms have been word of mouth for a long, long time. But are clean rooms a solution, or are they creating confusion? And often they struggle to make impact yet because at least the perceived hurdles of building them, of bringing them together are there. They are palpable. And we need such technology to really make retail data more interoperable. But the cost barriers and the skill barriers are still quite high to understand how do we best activate this. I also already mentioned this. We see different scaling models emerging, and we hear from, for instance, Unlimited today. But we also need to combat fragmentation to provide more systematic and easier buying interfaces for advertisers, a consolidation that we've seen nearly everywhere else in the advertising world. And I think there are different models available which are coming, but we need to think also about how can retailers work together. And we see this actually emerging outside the retail media space, but a list of large retailers, some are present here in the room or virtually in the cloud with us today, recently announced a global grocery retail venture capital fund to actually realize we need to build things together. We need to, if we're not competing in a vertical or in a market, we need to partner, right? To move our business online for personalized experience, but also to hold vendors to account if they're not really delivering the ad tech solutions that we require, and also to, in a sense, build own capital, i.e. to not just be purveyors of media, like we're purveyors of grocery products, but also being purveyors of technology and infrastructure. If we do these things right, I think we can really fulfill this ultimate vision that retail media moves beyond traditional trade relationships, and there's a reversal of the seller-buyer model between manufacturer and retailer, which is this is the old world, and the new world would be, in a sense, a much more symbiotic collaborative model where insights and media fuel product growth, product innovation for a potential flywheel. Will we ever reach this, the 100%? Not sure. But if we put this out as an ambition to get there and then take those incremental steps that you mentioned, I think we can get there. And 2024 is going to be a decisive year for us to put the direction on the right path. Thank you.